on 3-day weekends.
Tomorrow is Labor Day, a moment for us to recognize the many contributions workers have made to America's strength, prosperity, and well-being. It's an important day. It's also a 3-day weekend, which on the surface sounds amazing. Who doesn't want another day in the weekend? Well, I don't. Now, before you think I'm just a grumpy old man who looks really good because he lost some weight, allow me to explain. These 3-day weekends are always followed by a stressful 4-day work week. Things we normally would do in a 5-day work week are now stuffed into 4 days. I don't like that. Waking up after a 3-day weekend is never fun. That extra day of sleeping in for me convinces my body that I'll never have to wake up early again. Waking up a teenager on a Tuesday after a 3-day weekend is virtually impossible. Unnecessary drama. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. It makes more sense to play volleyball with a hornet's nest. I don't want that. 3-day weekends present unnecessary pressure to socialize. If it's a normal weekend like God intended, I don't have to do anything. But you add just 1 day more to a weekend, and suddenly I'm hosting a barbecue? Strangers are coming over and looking at my stuff? For some reason, I'm being invited to my daughter's boyfriend's dad's uncle's place for a night in Rhode Island? I don't want to do any of that. 3-day weekends always mean travel disasters. Doesn't matter which day you travel on a 3-day weekend, there's traffic. A drive that normally would take 40 minutes suddenly now takes 12 hours. I'm convinced some of those 3-day weekend drivers are paid by the government to get in my way. You probably think I'm being paranoid, but you know who invented the 3-day weekend? That's right, the government. Think about it.
Government introduced the 3-day weekend because the people required it, or the people wanted it.
And achieved cinematic immortality in the horror classic Rosemary's Baby.
What have you done to it? What have you done to its eyes?
To this day, the best part I've ever been offered.
You were 20 years old when you did Rosemary's Baby.
I think I was 21.
21. Getting these two legends together took a little convincing and coordinating. The directors each asking, you're saying, are you going to do it? Are you going to do it?
Yeah,
Is that
that's
really
what
how it
happened.
works?
Yeah.
But we did call each other a lot because I thought it would be so exciting to work with Mia, whom I adore. Just to listen to Mia talk about anything is such an event that I would rather do that than rehearse. I would rather do that than eat lunch. We all feel that way. It's an amazing experience just to listen to her.
Who decided to do this first?
Mia.
You decided to do
But
it.
it was dependent on Patty doing it.
But they went to Mia first. And I'm actually a second choice. I don't even know about I'm a second. I could be a third choice. I don't know.
Who was ahead of you?
Annette Bening.
I'm really glad it's Patty.
What's that like as an actor?
Well, I'll tell you. It's not comfortable.
How do you deal with it?
You accept the part because you need to.
The Roommate is a comedy about a New Yorker portrayed by Lupone who moves to the Iowa home of Pharaoh's character. Secrets and surprises abound.
I'm gay. Oh, you... I mean, I don't have any problem with homosexuals.
Oh, good.
No, not at all.
It's one set, one act, and 90 minutes of lines to remember. Who's better at remembering their lines?
We're both
We're about the same.
struggling.
Struggling.
It's just the two of us.
They are icons and legends, but they're also consummate artists.
Playwright Jen Silverman says The Roommate gives audiences the chance to see the richness and depth of women of a certain age.
When was the last time you were on a date?
When I got married. And we all saw how well that turned out.
Who Silverman says are often rendered invisible.
It is harder for roles for women our age. And it's a pity because we come with a certain amount of wisdom, experience that is still sexy. Still very sexy.
Why do you see it as sexy?
Why do I see it as sexy? Because it is. Because we come with a power.
A Broadway legend just loses it on stage.
Last night, theater actress Patti LuPone grabbed a cell phone out of the hands of an audience member who was texting.
Let's move on. Let's move on here. I'm not into all this. I don't know. It's got to do with acting, people performing in the public. Getting back to what the individual was talking about, the 3-day weekend. You know, I don't like a lot of things. I really don't. I don't like to get out and mow my yard whenever it's 100 degrees outside, but that don't mean I'm going to get a John Deere tractor out here and just get all under just because I don't like to get out and mow my yard. People need to grow up and realize that we all have responsibilities. Some of them we like, some of them we don't like. But to be a functionable society, in taking the bad with the good, the serious with the non-serious, we all have certain requirements and positions to hold as being a civil society. Let's see what this is about here. America first recognized Labor Day period take place September the 5th, 1882, which was just after the 1776 Revolutionary War in New York City. Union Square, an estimated 10,000 unorganized workers took part. Makers and jurors. And there's no doubt that Labor Day is set aside for the progression of our labors. But you know what? There's so many different labors out there that really don't ever get that recognition. That's not what you would call actual physical, tangible seeing labors. It's like people that counsel with people, people that talk to children, people that help build up families, people that minister to people, people that are willing to put their lives on the line, pertaining to them being good, honest patriots in a civilized society. These are all things that we really don't see, and because we don't see them, we really don't recognize them. But the fact of the matter is those labors are just as important as working in a factory somewhere, or being a qualified technician, or having a craft in doing a certain particular thing. All labors are important, providing that they're good labors and they're laboring for good purposes. Because if you're laboring towards getting out here wanting to kill somebody, if you're laboring towards wanting to get out here and steal and connive and hurt a bunch of people, those are not good labors. If you're laboring towards wanting to deceive people and throw society off into a state of total chaos, those are not good labors. So there's not, I'm going to repeat, there is not in societies all good labors. But those that are good labors, regardless whether you can see them or not, needs to be recognized. And this is the weekend for it here in America. Year 2024. Cool beans. Cool beans, man. Cool beans.
Gaza, his family released.
Oh, this is something serious here. Let's back it up. This is about the hostages. And I want to make a statement after they get through here regarding this horrible incident.
It's all just
of
ahead
this
on Face
of
the
this
Nation.
war that's going on over in the Middle East right now.
And welcome to Face the Nation. Margaret is off today. We begin this morning with new details from the Middle East, where the Israeli military says the bodies of the hostages in Gaza were found in a tunnel. One of the hostages was Hirsch Goldberg Colin, a 23-year-old American Israeli who was abducted from a music festival, one of 250 hostages taken captive on October 7th of last year. In a statement last night, President Biden said he was, quote, devastated and outraged, and recalled that Hirsch had lost his arm helping friends and strangers during the attack. Imtiaz Tayeb is in Tel Aviv this morning with the latest.
His name is Hirsch.
The parents of Hirsch Goldberg Poland worked tirelessly to keep Israel's hostage crisis on the global stage. Even addressing last month's Democratic Party convention.
Hirsch, if you can hear us, we love you. Stay strong. Survive.
Following the announcement, the 23-year-old Israeli-American's remains have been recovered from a tunnel in southern Gaza, his family released a statement saying, "With broken hearts, the Goldberg Poland family is devastated to announce the death of their beloved son and brother, Hirsch." The bodies of 5 other hostages have also been recovered: Carmel Gat, Eden Yerushalami, Alexander Lobanov, Almog Sarusi, and Master Sergeant Ori Danino. According to the Israeli media, preliminary autopsy reports have found all 6 were shot in the head. The Israeli military has said Hamas was responsible for their brutal murders, and also said the remains were discovered not far from where another hostage, Farhan al-Qadi, was found alive just last week. The news of the killings has triggered grief and anger across Israel, with many Israelis blaming the deaths on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for, in their words, sabotaging the hostage release and ceasefire deal with Hamas that's been under negotiation for months.
All they care about is the politics, and they didn't approve to do a deal with Hamas, and so our loved ones are still there, and currently we don't see the horizon and don't know when they will be back with us.
In a taped address, Netanyahu said the Israeli government is committed to continue striving for a deal that will return all of the hostages. While President Biden told reporters it was time to end the war on Gaza.
I think we're on the verge of having an agreement. It's just time to end it. Time to finish it.
But until an agreement is reached, the violence rages on, even as the UN attempts to vaccinate 640,000 Palestinian children to prevent a major outbreak of polio in Gaza. And based on the framework of a deal Israel and Hamas have already agreed to, 3 of the 6 hostages who were killed would have been released as part of what's called the humanitarian category during the first phase of an eventual ceasefire agreement, Nancy. And Hirsch Goldberg Poland would have been one of them.
So close to freedom. Imtiaz Taya reporting in Tel Aviv. Thank you. We are joined now by Jonathan Dekelchen, the father of one of the Israeli-American hostages still being held by Hamas. He joins us from Tel Aviv. Jonathan, thank you so much for being with us. I can only imagine what a difficult night it has been for your family, for all of the families of the hostages. Have you been able to connect with the Goldberg Polands or any of the families who lost their loved ones?
Sorry about that. Yes, I have corresponded with them over the course of the last few hours, expressing condolences. We are all absolutely horrified by the needless, senseless death of these 6 beautiful young people.
What, if anything, have you been told by the Israeli government about how these 6 individuals died and when they died? Hamas is saying that they were killed by Israeli bullets. Do you believe that?
Yes, we we know what we know from the media, actually, and from some statements from our military. They died very shortly before they were found by IDF troops. All of them were certainly living in a state of deprivation for many, many months. But in the end, as your reporter said, they were executed by Hamas. And the same is true, evidently, of 6 other bodies of Israeli hostages who were returned the week before. 4 of them from my kibbutz. And those were older men, in this case this week, younger people, but all of them alive. For months in Hamas captivity. So time is absolutely working against us, and quite honestly, against the people of Gaza as well.
Well, you heard Imtiaz report that several of the hostages who were killed were next in line to be released if there were to be a ceasefire. Who do you hold responsible for the fact that there is still no ceasefire today?
Well, the situation exists because Hamas on October 7th invaded Israel, killed nearly 1,400 people, committed mass rape, mass looting, destroyed homes and property, and has refused since October 7th to return all of the hostages. Now, that being said, given that we're dealing with Satan, I mean, that's sort of the launching point for any discussion. Israelis at large, and myself included, have been extremely critical of the Israeli government for not negotiating in good faith now for many, many months. There is no explanation, a reasonable explanation, why our government is refusing to deeply engage in these negotiations and complete them when our entire senior military establishment and intelligence community has been saying publicly and openly for weeks and months that the time has come to end the fighting in Gaza, get our hostages home, as many alive as possible. We know that many dozens of the 101 remaining hostages have already been murdered, and to end the madness in Gaza. It's simply the government that is preventing it.
You are originally from Connecticut. Your son, Sagi, is the father of 3 young girls, one of whom was born while he was in captivity. He's among 38 hostages taken from your kibbutz. What, if anything, do you know about where he is being held and what condition he is in?
Well, one small correction. On October 7th, 79 people were taken from our kibbutz and 51 slaughtered. There are 29 remaining from my kibbutz. We know that, well, he's 36 years old, father of 3 little girls. His 7-month pregnant wife miraculously survived with their 2 little girls on October 7th. The only thing that we know for sure about Sagi is that as of late November, early December, we know that he was alive, wounded but alive, and we know that because in the first hostage exchange, 40 of the 100 women and children who were released by Hamas in that first negotiation were from our kibbutz, and a handful of them had seen Sagi and other men mostly in the tunnels and could tell us that he was still alive.
Israel's opposition leader is now calling the Netanyahu government a death cabinet. He's calling for labor strikes against Netanyahu. Do you share that anger? You said that Netanyahu has not engaged seriously. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't think it's just my opinion alone. I think the vast majority of Israelis now have come to believe, by his actions, not his words, but by his actions, that he's been driven primarily by a desire to retain power with a narrow, very radical messianic coalition in the Israeli government. And he has made choices to pursue this fantasy of total victory over Hamas, a terrorist organization, no doubt. But this idea of total victory is a messianic one from his coalition partners and not realistic. And he's preferred that, at least to date, over the well-being of all the hostages. There are 7 Americans still remaining in Hamas captivity amongst the 101.
CBS News has...
As horrifying and sadly as all this is, I want to give my deepest condolences of what has went on and what is going on regarding all this, because we're basically seeing a front row seat in how wicked and demonic and evil that this group of people that decided to do this to the people over in Jerusalem, how wicked that they really are, especially whenever they're willing to build camps up underneath hospitals and schools and raping women and killing them and taking their telephones away from them and using their social media platform for psychological warfare in affecting that many more people's lives that is associated with that particular person. We're seeing evil stick out its ugly head once more again, and we have seen this throughout history again and again and again. And I know it sounded probably insensitive or demoralizing whenever I said the things that I said a few months ago, whenever all this first broke out, that the best that any of us could hope for is that they didn't go through a large portion of suffering. This would include myself or my family members, that if something like this was to occur, the best that I personally can hope for under the hand of this evil entity is that my suffering would not be extensive. I know that the suffering has been extensive in so many people's lives that was associated and tied to the victims. It's evil. And what really needs to be done pertaining to the leader of Israel is a spiritual revival, a spiritual awakening on both sides, not just one side, but both sides, in understanding that people that live together has to get along together if you're going to be a successful, thriving society. And because of that, you're going to have to learn to compromise with each other. This is one of the primary reasons why Jesus said, and I know I'll probably get criticized for this, but Jesus said to let the wheat grow with the tares until time of harvest. There is always going to be tares. There's always going to be the goats among the sheep. There's always going to be bad behavior with bad people. That's what Jesus was saying. Let them grow together until time of harvest. Now, there's no doubt the wicked, demonic, cruel, insensitive, mean people, they want to take out the good people. They want to take out God's children. They don't like us. They despise us. They don't understand us. They think that we're all loony because of believing in a living Savior, etc., etc., etc. Well, they can do whatever that they want to do other than harming us and hurting us either physically or emotionally. But that's exactly what we have seen pertaining to this anti-Semitism movement all over the world, of even colleges right here in America, universities, that wanted to side with Hamas versus siding with the ways of righteousness pertaining to what's supposed to be light. There's lots of things that I don't understand about their messianic laws over there, of why that they still to this day haven't accepted Jesus Christ as their personal Lord and Savior. But not all of them are Orthodox Jews that believe that way. There are a certain amount of people over there that have been converted over Christianity rather than believing in the old Mosaic law, which is basically an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. This is what needs to be handled appropriately, efficiently, over in that area pertaining to the church sector all over the world. Needs to cry out, not just in word, but in deed, in sending people over there that can actually help to bring forth this revival or this unification. People that want to butcher one another and chop one another up and kill one another, eventually you'll figure out, it may take a little while, but eventually you'll figure out that this was not the best alternative route for us to take. It was sad in seeing how the Europeans come over here and wanted to dictate and dominate and tell the red man and what to do and what to do, because the red man already had his established family sense over here and how that they was taking care of each other. And it was the red man that basically gave in to the white man and said, you know what, maybe it is time to compromise because we've lost so much regarding evil wanting to dictate over good. Now, that doesn't mean that you compromise in the sense of becoming that in which what they are because of evil. But what it does mean is that sometimes you have to learn to compromise with one another if you're going to have any hopes of having a successful, thriving society. and turning that area over there into nothing but a wasteland is actually counterproductive to that. The same way over in Russia. Why would they have believed in taking over the Ukrainian property after turning it into a wasteland was going to be a benefit to the Russian people is beyond me. It's the most senseless, ungodly, insanity thing that anybody, I think, could ever even imagine. I mean, if you're going to take over a piece of property, ordinarily you kill everything around it other than killing the structures and the infrastructures around it. Because what good is it after you've taken over that particular piece of property if the property is nothing but a wasteland? It don't make no sense. I mean, if you study wars in the Bible, in the Old Testament, it was primarily over beliefs, and also it was primarily over people having assets that other people wanted. That was the primary reason for having wars. Over beliefs, and somebody wanting something that somebody else had. They wanted to basically dominate and dictate their lives. This has turned out to be a nightmarish event, and that's saying it modestly, pertaining to this. And I do hope and pray that for those that did hear what I said whenever all this first broke out, that the best that anybody can do is pray and hope in a situation like this that their suffering will not be intense. I hope that they will understand the reason why that I said what I said. And it wasn't because I wanted to say it. It's because I felt like that's what needed to be said. Because it's true. Even if it was me being captured, the best that any of us can hope for is that our suffering will not be intense. That's kind of like me saying what I've said about 9/11 pertaining to the second airplane that never should have hit that second tower, that even if I was in it, the United States military should have shot it out of the sky before it ever got that close to that second tower, knowing that we was under attack. Even if I was in that plane. And I mean that. Based upon the analogy that the needs of the many always outweigh the needs of the few. And if you are captured and you are in a bad situation regarding the needs of the many versus the needs of the few, the best that you can hope for is that your suffering will not be intense. And I know by watching all this unfold on TV, national TV, I know that the suffering has been intense. But also know this, that it's not logical for the leader of Israel to think that he's going to be able to diminish and completely eradicate the evil around him, because he's not going to be able to do it. That's why Jesus said, let the wheat grow with the tares until time of harvest. Let God deal with those tares. Let God deal with those goats. Let God deal with them demonic figures. In the meantime, life has to go on, and you have to be a civilized society. If not, you're not going to be a society at all. You're going to come to your own demise. There's no doubt the people in Israel had a right to defend themselves. And I stand with that, and I will always stand with that, because of what Hamas done was just evil and ever since thinkable. The same way with what Russia done with the Ukrainian people was evil. Was evil. That could have been worked out. That could have been negotiated. But instead, look what he's done to his own people. Look what President Putin now has done to his own country by doing what he has done. Did he make things better for his own land? No. He made things worse. They're suffering right now. They're going through things right now that they never would have had to have thought about suffering through in the middle of COVID if their leader didn't do what their leader done. For every action is a reaction. And usually, when someone declares war on somebody, it's going to have a profound effect upon both sides. On both sides.
Captivity amongst the 101.
CBS News has confirmed that National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is going to meet virtually today with you and the other families of American hostages. Do you believe that the U.S. government has done everything it can to bring these hostages home?
Well, I think the U.S. government itself would say that they would have done enough when all the hostages are home, all of the 101. They say that in our meetings. I can absolutely state that since a couple of days after October 7th, the U.S. administration from top to bottom has been extraordinarily supportive of the hostage families, inclusive, sensitive, empathetic. I believe that they have done everything in their power up to now, but at the end of the day, two men have to say yes. One is Yahya Sinwar in a tunnel under Gaza somewhere with the blood of thousands on his hands, Israelis and Palestinians, and Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. President Biden, I believe, has done everything that he can. We need some more, but time is certainly against us. There's no question of that.
Well, we are hoping that you get more, and we appreciate you sharing your story with us today. Jonathan Deckelchen, thank you so much. And Face the Nation will be back in 1 minute. Stay with us.
This is another reason why that I continue to say, and will continue to say, that war has never been a glamorous, glorious thing to witness or to experience. It don't matter what side that you may be on, war is war. And whenever the Luciferian Lucifer decided that it was going to do what it done in basically creating or causing war up in heaven, all the sufferings, all the hardships, all the pain, all the misery, all the agony goes to it, because we would not be suffering what we're suffering down here on the planet Earth if it was not for this evil entity. That's the reason why God is going to do away with this evil entity eventually. And eventually we will live in peace and harmony up in heaven, to where we won't no longer have to worry about diseases, about clashes, about all the other things that goes along with the human activity, as well as the spiritual warfare will not be there. It will be over. But it was Lucifer that created this animosity or this adversity. And until the true Christians see that and understand that, we're probably going to continue to be in disarray about it. I had an individual, and I think the world of him, don't get me wrong, by the name of Roger, that runs Beulah Cowboy Church over here. During about the first year of him understanding my message coming out of the Bible, he basically said, well, yeah, but I didn't realize that you was anointed by God towards actually going after the physical Satan. Well, it ain't just so much me going after the physical Satan, but it's all of God's children supposed to be against rapes, murders, lying, cheating, conniving, covetousness, and all the other things that break the commandments of God. It is a warfare. And that's one of the reasons why that Satan has gained the upper hand, not just in this particular battle over there, but over here in America and throughout the world, is because too many Christians have sat idly by and put their hands up underneath their hips and refused to actively pursue in the destruction of the axes of evil. Now, we know that there's only one person that's going to be able to do this, and that's the Creator. But we also know that we're not supposed to compromise with evil, regardless whether it be a rapist, a murderer, or a liar, or some other kind of offense, whenever it comes to against God's commandments and against God, that even though we can't abolish them right away, we still have to tolerate them. And even though we tolerate them does not mean that we're going to unify ourselves with them. This is the reason why the Bible says, be in the world, but don't be of the world. Be in the world, but don't be of the world. In other words, don't be a drunkard, don't be a rapist, don't be a murderer, don't be a liar, don't be all the other things that evil generates from evil. So we have to tolerate it. And the reason why we have to tolerate it is because God hadn't come back yet. Whenever God comes back for the major second global international resurrection, then we will no longer have to tolerate these things on the level that we're tolerating them now, pertaining to seeing evil and anguish and horror and being terrorized on a day-to-day level. Because that event has not happened yet, it puts the true Christians in between a hard place and a rock. Once more, the second coming of Christ, I believe, has been delayed because certain people did not want to believe, nor did they want to support the founder of the Windmill Ministries missions that was actually part of spearheading this movement that Ronald Reagan was a part of during his latter administration towards convincing the superpowers that the world was not going to be destroyed by humanity, but it was going to be destroyed by God. But humanity right now has made such of an effort in destroying itself, it's going to take a supernatural entity to ever change it around. And it's going to require more than the founder of the Windmill Ministries or the founder of any ministry to get it turned around. It's going to take all of us, but most importantly, it's going to take the Holy Spirit to be spearheading this movement if we're ever going to see any temporary peace towards the meek inheriting the earth down here on planet Earth.
Now by Massachusetts Democratic Governor Maura Healey, who is joining us from Boston this morning. Governor,
these are now politics. Let's go on here.
in the country, and I want to put this graphic up. Take a look. The other 9 have all issued their endorsements for President of the United States. They've all endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz. It is now September 1st. Where has summer gone? When do the Teamsters plan to announce who they are endorsing?
Well, I think historically the Teamsters have always endorsed after both respective conventions. This is a little different this time under our leadership. We've brought every single candidate to the table in front of our rank and file members and our general executive board, and we're waiting on Vice President Harris to commit to come meet with us.
And I believe her campaign says they are working with you to figure out a date for that. Her policies are more or less in line with the current president, who you did sit down with when you thought that he was going to be the nominee, when we all thought he was going to be the nominee. Are there any concerns that you have about Harris possibly being less pro-labor, less pro-union than the current president?
So our union is a lot different than most unions. We represent 1.3 million members. Half of our members are Republicans, half of our members are Democrats, so we have to serve all of our membership equally. Look, everybody has a different style of leadership. We want the opportunity to sit down with Vice President Harris. I mean, I said to someone the other day, you don't hire someone unless you give them an interview. And, this is our opportunity to ask her about Teamster-specific issues and also labor issues. So until we have that meeting, obviously we will wait to make that determination.
So now the weight game.
Nation, stay with us.
yourself.
You're watching KF.
Welcome back to Face the Nation. We continue our conversation now with Teamsters President Sean O'Brien. Mr. O'Brien, thanks so much for sticking with us. One of your fellow unions, the United Auto Workers, filed federal labor charges against the Republican nominee Donald Trump after he seemed to celebrate the notion of firing workers who go on strike. That happened in a conversation that he was having with Elon Musk. Are you with the UAW on this? Do you support the action they took?
Look, I support anybody that attacks labor. They should be held accountable, and any organization that's going to hold them accountable. I can't speak for the UAW, but if you recall when those remarks were made by former President Trump, I was the first union to call them out, call the administration out, and call, quite frankly, Elon Musk out. I've been fighting corporate billionaires and greed for the last 2.5 years, and the UAW feels they have a right to file an NLRB charge, and that's their right. I've got a right to call out former President Trump or anybody else that attacks labor.
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, you called it economic terrorism. How did it go over with your members?
Look, our members love the fact that they have a voice, that they have the ability to stand up and fight corporate America. It's been a long time coming. Over the last 2.5 years, the Teamsters Union has had 226 strikes. We've grown more than we ever have, so there is a great appetite for the fight with our rank and file members, and our rank and file members enable us to fight for them day in and day out.
That's a perfect segue into my next question, which is about union membership in this country. It is Labor Day weekend after all, so let's take a look at the state of union labor in this country. About 10% of the U.S. workforce are union members, down from about 20% in 1983. A majority of Americans say that's bad. That decline is bad for working people. Is the decline irreversible in your view?
The decline is definitely irreversible. Now, let's look back, to 1983. That's when a bipartisan congressional bill was passed, trucking deregulation, and we lost 400,000 members. A lot of companies went bankrupt. So, although there's a lot of politicians taking credit for the labor movement over the last couple of years, they're the same politicians that caused this problem that we face today. But to answer your question, I think we are definitely on the upswing. We have proved how valuable the American worker is to this country, especially through one of the biggest crises we faced was a pandemic, and that has obviously incentivized workers to form unions, and we've got to work collaboratively with both sides to make sure that people will be able to organize without retribution or retaliation moving forward, and that's up to politicians, whether you're an R, or D, or an I.
You shared that message at the Republican convention, a move that some members of Teamsters leadership did not approve of. They were pretty vocal about that. It appears that it also cost you a speaking slot at the Democratic convention. Did the Democrats ever tell you why they didn't give you a chance to speak?
No, they didn't. And look, I'm going to say this. Whatever the critics out there, and they're very few in the leadership, whenever I get an opportunity to highlight the American worker, especially the Teamster worker, I'm going to take any and all venue. We asked both conventions respectively at the same time, and the Republican National Convention immediately responded to us, didn't try and edit any of our messages, and I was hopeful that the Democrats would do the same, but they didn't. I'm not upset about it, but I can tell you this, my rank and file members who have been lifelong Democrats are not happy about it.
Yeah, I know there were some members of the union who spoke, but that's not the same as having the leader of the organization speak. Very quickly, did you choose to speak at the Republican convention, which is a pretty unusual move for a union leader, because you feel that Trump has been more pro-labor than past Republican nominees?
No. I spoke there because it was the ability to highlight how important we are. It was the ability to call out the people, the corporate elitists, who forget who built this country, the American workers. People like to, have their own opinions on why we were there, but I was there to talk about the American workers. It wasn't an endorsement for any and all Republicans. It was strictly a message about how important and how valuable we are, and to let the people know that fight us every day, that we're not going away.
And in lots of ways, I agree with everything that this individual is talking about, because the fact of the matter is, it's not our labor that has put us where we are today, but rather it has been all these bigger 1%ers, the retailers, that have diverted over into other parts of the country to get things a whole lot cheaper to send over here, that basically put the American people in behind the black ball, or the 8 ball, that now you've got all these different factories that used to run sometimes 2, maybe even 3 shifts, that the buildings are just sitting there empty. What has happened? What has occurred? Was it because of the union? Was it because of the labor unions? No. We still got the labor force today, the same as they had back then. But what good is having the labor force if now you've been cutthroated by all these other different manufacturers and retailers of going overseas and getting stuff 3 times cheaper than what we can design it or build it over here? This is the reason why I told somebody on one of my other videos, I've made so many it's kind of hard to keep up with everything or all of them, is that the American people, pertaining to our politics, got the cart in front of the horse whenever it come to competing on an international level. Now, whenever we was only competing with just 1 or 2, we was number 1. We was number 1 in everything from agriculture to medicine to trucking to parts to automobiles, etc. We was number 1. But why aren't we no longer number 1? Because now we have expanded towards now dealing with all 200, little less than 200 countries, and because of it, we've had to take second seat in all these other countries catching up with us. And in the meantime, their infrastructure, their economy is totally different than the rest of the world's. And because they have sweatshops working young children at the age of 13, 14 years old sewing up Hanes underwear, they can afford to make Hanes underwear and put them on the market 3 times cheaper than what the American people can even think about making the same pair of underwear here in America. We've been cutthroated. And one of those reasons why we've been cutthroated is because our politicians didn't put into consideration that this unfair play was going to occur. Just like our politicians didn't put it into the equation in thinking that China, as we was building China up for the past 20 years, and China basically turning out to be as strong as what China is today economically, who would have thought that China would have turned around and cut our own throats? Well, this is what Christ talked about pertaining to taking your pearls and throwing them before the swine. That if you allow yourself to be taken advantage of, odds are you're going to be taken advantage of. That's what's going to happen to you. You're going to be taken advantage of by your competition. And that's one of the reasons why that is put America in the position that America's in right now, because we have plenty of young, good children out there that are willing to meet the demands of the labor forces out there. But yet no, we don't have the money people in behind them that's willing to build the factory so that we can build the Hanes underwear. Why not? Why are they not getting in behind the money people and saying, well, we'll build this facility and we'll start building our own Hanes underwear? Why are we not doing that? Because all the retailers have decided to cut our own throats and go to other parts of the world in buying Hanes underwear from somebody else a whole lot cheaper. And I'm just using Hanes underwear as an example. I'm not picking on Hanes underwear because I myself wear Hanes underwear occasionally from time to time. But I'm just using that as an example. That way people can understand when we get to talking about labor issues here on Labor Day weekend pertaining to the Teamsters, it's not their faults. A matter of fact, in lots of areas, the unions has actually been a good thing, because if it wasn't for the unions, we wouldn't have, the labor industry wouldn't have near the safety issues that they have today that has been met because of the unions. Having extra doors, having fans, having rights pertaining to being able to have a better, safer environment of the things that you either breathe or exposed to, having fire extinguishers under your safety guide issues. If it wasn't for the unions, we as laborers here in America would not have had the resources that we had growing up working in a lot of these different places. So it's not the unions per se that has come back and bit the American people. What has bit the American people has been the 1%ers pertaining to the retailers. And whenever I talk about retailers, I'm not just talking about Walmart. Keep that in mind. I'm talking about all of them out there that buy and sell, that if you go into their facility and you start looking, a great deal of their products have been made in other areas other than America. Some a little bit more than others. But you would think, you know, some of these predominant companies that are established here in America, you would think, well, they're going to stand true to the word that even Sam Walton gave out, America first, and we will always sell America and build from America. But yet now, whenever old man Sam Walton died, we see how their own children, the Walton family, cut everybody's throat so that they could prosper and grow and become as strong as what they are. Who would have thought that all the other retailers out there, regardless whether they were selling Hanes underwear or selling hammers in Lowe's, would have done the same thing? But they did. And in the meantime, it left America holding the bag. And you know what was in the bag? Nothing. We have been sold downstream because they could manufacture, build it, ship it over here to America. Sometimes not a third, sometimes not 2/3, but sometimes 3/3 of what we could even think about building. That's the reason why we see all the TVs, that basically all the TV manufacturers that was here in America basically shut down their doors. And now we can get a 32-inch color TV that's been made in Japan or China or some other part of the world for basically less than $200. Why is that? Because we cannot build a facility to start making TVs here in the United States and compete with those type of prices. It has left the American people in behind the 8 ball. Who has done this? What has done this? Our prior politicians that in the meantime was stuffing their own pockets full by making all these other deals with all these other different countries, that now the American people is left holding the bag. And the bag that they're holding is empty. It's sad, but it's true. So whenever I get to talking about our American politicians pertaining to our labor force issues, it's basically got the cart in front of the horse, that we was doing real good back in the 70s after World War II. I mean, we was humping and pumping and thriving and gliding and man, we had all kinds of work, and we was building factories and facilities, and even myself got involved a little bit in the industrial era of building high rises and etc. That was back during the time that they was building all the nuclear plants. And then along about the 80s, whenever they had a problem up there in New York with one of them, that basically shut down that idea towards building more nuclear plants. But not only did it affect that, but across the board, probably long about the 90s, maybe around 2000, the construction industry has failed tremendously towards taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back, because we're no longer humping and bumping and building and taking care of our roads and building new infrastructures and bridges and etc. What has done this? Our prior politicians. Those that led us down this endless road of doom and gloom, and now we're all seeing the consequences on account of it. So it was not, I'm trying to make a point here, it was not the Teamsters unions that has done this to us. If anything, the Teamsters union should be admired for them becoming as strong as what they have, as long as what they have, because if it wasn't for them, I guarantee you, we as American people would not be having and dealing with the things that we have dealt with in the past towards working in a cleaner environment and a safer environment here in America. Now, because all them other countries are not participating in the same rules, just like the sweatshops that's willing to put 12 and 13, 14-year-old girls in a Hanes underwear shop and start making Hanes underwear, we should be smart enough to understand what they're doing as far as cutthroating, and because of it, we should abort from that particular industry or that particular country that's allowing for that to happen, and basically blackball them. Get away from them. No, don't participate in them because they're not playing by the same set of rules. But did our politicians do that? No. If anything, that just gave them that much more incentive towards, hey, we want 2,000 whatever bundles of Hanes underwear to be sent to Walmart over on the western side of the United States to be there by a certain date, certain hour, and the TVs, bring all that you can. We've been flooded with all these gizmos and gadgets, and you can walk in any retail store and look at the toys that are nothing but pieces of junk as far as I'm concerned. You can throw them against a tree one time and they basically fall into a billion pieces, almost like our regular automobiles today. You can barely bump into one of them, and my God, they just go to springs go to coming out, and stuff goes to falling off the car, even though you just barely bumped it. But have you seen the prices of toys? The quality of the toy is not near as good as what the quality of the toy was back in the 60s and the 70s, because it was built to last. It was rugged. And it didn't matter if it was a Barbie doll or a Tonka toy of a bulldozer. Those toys that they built back then was made to last. The toys today that's made out of cheap plastic, I promise you, you can just drop one of them. You don't have to throw it. Just drop one of them on the floor and it's going to fall into a million pieces. It's over with. Game over with. You just spent that $35, $40, $50 for that toy for nothing. And some of them are even higher than that. Some of them go over $100 just for an average toy, depending upon the market load and what the demand is for that particular toy. I've never seen so much stuff that's been displaced out of normalcy as I have in my lifetime, just within the past 30 plus years, since a great nation basically decided to take a left instead of a right. All these compatible factors could have already been dealt with appropriately, efficiently, and effectively. But because we did not have good leadership, and because our American government basically allowed for the Sam Walton family to do what they've done, and now all the other retail stores basically followed in pursuit towards not punishing them or dictating to them about what that they could do or couldn't do pertaining to their own people, it has left the American people holding the bag. And the bag has been empty for probably the past 15, 20 years. And this, my friends, should not have happened towards the American people being so downstream. In the meantime, you got people like Mitch, you got people like Nancy Pelosi, and you got all them other politicians that has basically been stuffing their pockets full while the American people was being so downstream. Now, if you can't see that and understand that here in America on Labor Day weekend, then something is wrong with your comprehension, because that's exactly what has happened to the American people. And it's one of the most saddest horrifying, traumatizing events that I think that any American, true-blooded, red-blooded American could ever witness on a global scale. And that's in addition to all the things that's happened to me in the past 30 plus years on a personal level pertaining to the Windmill Ministries missions. I could get into a whole brand new sector on me explaining myself about all of that, in which I don't have enough time to do that. Besides that, we're getting off focus of what we're trying to be focused on here on Labor Day weekend. But I've never seen so much displacency, so much irregularities, so much imbalances. And it just seems like that the more the people here in America and throughout the world become imbalanced, the more that the forces of nature pertaining to our weather becomes imbalanced. And I've said this before, it's as if we are being mirrored. Whenever you look into a mirror, we are being mirrored above our heads towards the things that we're involved in down here. And the worse that we become down here, the worse that the things become up there. It's like a mirror. And we're being watched, we're being looked at by the supernatural that's looking down on planet Earth. And the more difficult that the people become, the more difficult that the surrounding circumstances become pertaining to the forces of nature. We are bringing this upon to ourselves. It's the same thing as Sodom and Gomorrah, or some of those other cities, some of them other colonies, some of them other places throughout the Bible, as well as looking at the history books. Basically, society brought that grief and brought that anguish to their own selves. And if we don't watch, that's exactly what we're on the path of doing right here in the good old USA. That used to be one of the most strongest, longest, best nations on a labor scale issue that ever was throughout the whole world, the whole planet. And now we're taking second seat to all that. Why? Is it because of the unions, the Teamster unions? No, it's not. No, it is not. It's because of our demented, run down, selfish politicians that wanted to get in power to feed their own agendas rather than feeding ours.
Sean O'Brien, president of the Teamsters, thanks so much, and we'll be looking forward to hearing who your union eventually endorses. Thanks for being here. And we'll be right back.
You know, these big companies or these big movements that has happened pertaining to the representatives, there's a lot of weight on these representatives' shoulders in what that their organization is going to do and what they're not going to do and the reason for doing it. And I just imagine in that particular individual's situation for the past 10, 12, 15, maybe even 20 years, his job has become more and more and more intense, because from one presidential race to another, you really don't know who's going to come true on the promises that they've made. You really don't know how you can put your trust in this particular person or this particular nominee versus this particular nominee. And things has become so radicalized that these people that are holding these positions, their jobs have become intensely more harder. I mean, harder. Because now they don't know the proper leadership pertaining to leading their company or their industry or their foundation in the right way. Who has brought this upon to us? You got it.
Promised to launch the largest deportation operation in American history, and he has blamed the Biden administration for a historic number of illegal.
Now think about that for a second. We got a candidate that's promised to have one of the biggest deportations in American history. Who's going to pay for the labor? Who's going to pay to feed these people while they're in captivity? And who's going to pay to have these people rounded up, put in automobiles, and then taken to facilities and then housed and then put on other facilities and taken back to Mexico. Who's going to pay for all that? We are. The American people are. So now we have been captured. We are now in between a hard place and a rock. Damned if we do versus damned if we don't. Now the American people has to make a choice between the lesser of the two evils. Is it going to be more practical to be out all this kind of labor and money and wear and tear on automobiles and wearing out tires and having to house these people long enough to transport them back to wherever that they come from? Or is the next solution towards trying to do something different? Maybe put restrictions on their lives, maybe put it to where that if they do get out here and want to start a family and work, that a certain amount of their labors will be penalized until a certain amount of time has went by, and then after that they can now start working as any other American. Because I know that my brother David, he complained all the time whenever the stuff started getting rough around here in Northwest Tennessee, long about 2007, long about the first retail burst whenever Obama was president, that it got to the point that you couldn't get out here and get a job with any retailer around here. It didn't matter. Anybody associated with the public, pertaining to a public job, you basically had to go through a work service, and in the process of going through a work service, you had to sacrifice, I think it was about 6 months of your pay. I think it was $1, maybe $2 an hour going to this work service that got you that job. Now that's what we was doing to our own people right here in Northwest Tennessee. We're talking about the laborers. We're talking about the people that was making them parts, putting those parts on them cars and sending out that material. We was punishing our own people by doing that. That is so counterproductive. So we know that system can work. Well, how come that system can't work whenever it comes to all these illegals? You make them sit down, you make them sign a contract, you tell them this is the way the cow's going to eat the cabbage, and if you go through all the hula hoops and the cartwheels, this is your reward for doing it. But in the meantime, you're gonna have to take second seat to the other Americans that has already been here, especially the Native Americans, regarding you not getting the same privileges as we are until you have earned those privileges. You have to earn them privileges. This is what I'm talking about pertaining to the Bible, throwing your pearls before the swine. If you continue to keep throwing the pearls to your swine, you know what's going to happen to your pearls? You ain't going to have none no more. You know why? Because you done gave them to the wrong people. That's what the American government has been doing to us, my friends, here on Labor Day weekend. And I wanted to verify that because it is crucial. If we are going to be a self-sustainable nation without going in the hole every day of trillions and trillions of dollars, we're going to have to work smarter other than working harder. And those that do want to come over here, yes, they can play, but they're going to pay for that play. They're going to have to earn that play. And if they don't want to play that way, well then load them up and send them out. But give them an option. Give them an option is what I'm saying, because if you just go to loading up everybody, my God, do you realize the hundreds of millions, probably billions of dollars, if not even more than that not counting the disorder that it's going to count. I think it was Texas that made a statement probably about 15 years ago that they was talking about the immigrant problem with all the Mexicans coming over here. So this isn't just something that just developed over yesterday. But they was talking about the drugs and all the illegals coming over here, and they was talking about doing a roundup in Texas. And the mayor, I mean not the mayor, but the governor spoke up and said if we was to do that in Texas, it would disable our economy. You know why? Because there's too many Mexicans working in positions in Texas that if they was to round them all up at one time, it would destroy it would destroy themselves. Well, do you not think that it would possibly do the same thing to America? You know, you can strain at a gnat to swallow a camel. So when it comes to good leadership, you got to have good common sense before you make these promises to the American people. Well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to round up everybody. Really? Who's going to pay for it? Somebody's got to fit the bill on all that.
Border crossings in recent years. But those crossings have fallen sharply since the Biden administration implemented new asylum restrictions in June. CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez has more.
Hoy te deportaron de los Estados Unidos. You were deported from the U.S. today.
Sí,
this morning.
Hoy en la mañana.
In the morning. How are you feeling now? ¿Cómo te sientes ahora?
Pues estoy desesperado. No sé qué voy a hacer.
You don't know what you're going to do.
We found that desperation is all too familiar in this border town, where scores of migrants are routinely turned away by the U.S.
We're in Nogales, Mexico. As you can see, the U.S. is just a few yards away in that direction. But for many of the migrants here behind me, it is now completely out of reach. They were deported just this morning from the U.S. under President Biden's executive order on asylum.
That order has shut down asylum processing between legal entry points at the U.S.-Mexico border, allowing officials to ramp up deportations of migrants crossing illegally.
And so you see dozens of people, families with children deported every morning.
Every morning. It's 24/7.
Dora Rodriguez crossed the U.S. border herself in the 1980s to escape the civil war in El Salvador. She comes to Nogales every week with other American volunteers to offer food and guidance to deportees in need.
You know, they don't even know where they're at.
They don't know where they are.
They don't even know where they are.
Or what to do.
Right. So we encourage them to go to the shelters, local shelters in this area, to get a bath, to take a good meal.
The Biden administration says the new measures are partly why illegal border crossings have hit a 4-year low. But according to Rodriguez, those policies mean people fleeing danger are being turned away.
They're fleeing violence from organized crimes, from gangs, hunger.
And there's no doubt, if I had a family down in El Salvador or wherever, in Mexico, especially if they was young girls, I would want to get them out of that environment. I would be willing to cross whatever Rubicon that it took for me to cross to be able to put my family in safety. So once more, where does the fault lie? The fault lies upon the politicians of that country that wasn't willing to do the proper thing that has allowed for these drug lords, these cartels, these kingpins to basically take over their region or take over their country or take over whatever. And now it's just an infestation of horror in a lot of those areas, including Cuba, that are only getting worse instead of better. You can call it a point system, you can call it whatever you want to, but the fact of the matter is there is so many illegals over here in America. I think it's something like 40 million people, and that's probably a low account. There's so many over here to where if we was to pick up stakes and start loading up everybody and taking them down here to the local jail cells and locking them up, or putting them in concentration camps because it's so many, and then sending them back over, you have to have enough common sense to realize between the labor and the usage of the buildings and the gas and the mechanical expenses that goes along with all this stuff is going to cost not millions but billions of dollars, in addition to upsetting other people's, basically their economy, like Texas, towards basically bankrupting Texas. So you have to go about doing this in a proper form. If not, you're going to strain at a gnat to swallow a camel, and whenever it's all said and done with, you have chosen the worser of the better of the two evils rather than the better of the two evils. We're already captured. We're already in a hard spot. We've already allowed for this infestation of basically all these illegals to come over here. We've been invaded. Now, what's the next best second choice other than to load them all up and cost billions of dollars? Put them on a point system. Put them on a earn system to where we will promise them, as long as they keep their nose clean, as long as they don't get out here and commit a bunch of violent crimes or whatever, that after a certain amount of time, you earn your privileges of having the same privileges as any other American. But until then, you got to prove yourself. Because if not, we're going right back to the Bible and throwing our pearls before the swine. And like I said, if you throw your pearls out long enough to the wrong swine, eventually you're not going to have no more pearls. There was a reason why Jesus told his Christians, his followers that. He didn't want his followers, the Christians, to be taken advantage of. And once you figure out that somebody's using you, somebody's abusing you, somebody's neglecting you, somebody ain't treating you fairly, walk away. Walk away. Don't give them anything that you got. Because you know good and well that what you're giving them, they're just taking it and using it for their own benefit. That's exactly what's happened in the past 30 years pertaining to the ministry in the past 30 years that I've been putting out to the American people. And that's also another one of the reasons why that I continue to keep saying that it wasn't that Dennis James Jackson failed the Windmill Ministries, because I done my part. I put the information out there. It was the so-called Christians and the rest of the world that didn't do their part towards supporting the ministry, that supported peace and utopia and love and grace and mercy and all the other things that Jesus Christ taught. So don't try to give me the blame pertaining to what that you have done or what that you didn't do that you should have done here in Northwest Tennessee. We know what happened. We know why it happened. And we know who it happened to.
Criminals, and they are yet punished by our laws. These people is traumatized for a lifetime.
You wanted to protect your daughters. Querías proteger a tus hijas. Rosales and her daughters had been deported that morning. She says her family fled their hometown in Mexico after a man started harassing her daughters. You wanted to explain to U.S. officials why you came, pero no te dieron esa oportunidad. You did not get that chance. Are you planning to potentially enter the U.S. again?
Sí.
Yes.
Por mis hijas.
Because of your daughters.
Por mis hijas. Arriesga uno por su
Pero
familia.
te pueden deportar otra vez. They can deport you again.
Lo sé.
You know that.
Lo sé. Pero hay veces que hay que arriesgar todo.
You're willing to take that risk. A risk many will still.
The devil's on the move. So I can honestly tell people like Brother Roger, yes, it is our responsibility to stomp out the very axis of evil. It is our responsibility to try to tell people the teachings of Christ that surrounds the Ten Commandments. Yes, we're to rule, but we're to rule with dignity, with honesty, with integrity. Give these people a choice of making their own beds hard or proving to society that they are deemed worthy to be an American citizen.
Many will still take, despite harsher U.S. policies. Camilo Montoya Galvez, CBS News, Nogales, Mexico.
We are joined now by Texas Republican Congressman Tony Gonzalez. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us here in Washington. You represent a border district. You heard what Camilo just reported, and let's put some numbers up on the screen so people really know what we're talking about. All year long, the number of migrant encounters along the southern border was hovering a little below 200,000 a month. Then this executive order went into place in early June, and those numbers plunged to 100,000 in July. They were cut in half. Are you ready to call this move a success?
Nancy, it's great to be here. I represent nearly half of the overall southern border. I literally was on the border on Friday. What I can tell you is things are getting worse. And let me give you an example. So in the New Mexico area, to date, there's been 100 illegal immigrants that have perished. Okay, every part of the border is different. Parts of my district, it takes you 3 days humping through the desert in order to make it to the border. In the New Mexico area, it takes you 1 hour. So how is 100 people dying in 1 hour? The reason is these criminal organizations are holding these migrants in these stash houses for sometimes over a month, feeding them one meal and one bottle of water a day. So when it is time for them to finally make that trek, they give them caffeine pills and they try to rush them over. So in many cases, the humanitarian crisis along the border is getting worse. The other piece of it too, in El Paso, one of the safest countries in America, the FBI just conducted an operation this week, and they scooped up dozens of these criminal gangs, via the anti-gang task force. So in many cases, Americans are less safe because of this, and migrants are less safe for this. I've been of the advocate, this is how you solve it. If somebody comes over illegally, they immediately get deported. You also double down on legal immigration. If we want to win the space race, we're going to need engineers from all over the world. If we're going to grow our economy, we're going to need the hospitality industry, construction workers, and other areas. You double down on work visas. You vet people, and you double down on that. We're not seeing any of that.
So you've been pushing for the administration to take executive action for years. They've now done it, and you're saying you're not happy about it, even though the numbers have come down so sharply?
Well, ask the 100 families that died. This is a part of the ugly part of it is so many people are dying, and those are the people that are dying. What about the people that are getting assaulted and other areas? It's getting worse. So people are looking at the numbers and thinking, oh, it's getting better. I look at it, who is coming over and what is happening to these people. In many cases, these criminal organizations, these Tran de Agua, TDA.
In other words, the dynamics has gotten worse within those numbers because they're doing this and getting away with it. My suggestion would be, pertaining to the restaurant business and all the other construction industries, that our government is going to have to set up some sort of a program to where they will be rewarded somehow or another through maybe tax exemptions or some other way that these people can get on board pertaining to trying to help these migrants. And once more, you're going to have to come up with some sort of a point system of earning, to where if you have proven yourself to be a good, decent person here in America pertaining to this contract that you signed, then America has to abide by its contract by saying, okay, you are now considered an American citizen. You have earned the right to have the same benefits as everybody else. If we don't do it that way, it's going to be counterproductive in rounding up everybody and trying to take them to the areas that they come from, because that's going to cost that much more money. Somebody is going to have to pay for that in doing that. They're already here. There's already 40 plus million of them here. You've already messed up. Don't take something that you've already done bad and turn it into something worse, is my point, because it's counterproductive. You ain't going to settle nothing, because in the meantime they're still going to be coming over the border. It's sickening in how that we have seen our politicians make a mess out of everything since the late 80s. And this is a reflection up onto the Reagans and the Bushes and them setting a sail the American people in the wrong direction, all because of trying to stifle, cover up, or destroy that in which what God had purposely put in place. Once more, I did not choose this. It chose me. I didn't choose this occupation towards being a spokesman, a communicator, a messenger. God gave this to me towards me running with it. And I'm running with it the best that I can. Now, I'm still just a one-horse pony show. And I'll continue to be a one-horse pony show as long as I do not get support either from the locals or from my own government pertaining to all of this. And that's exactly what a certain amount of people I know wanted to do. They wanted me not just to be a one-horse pony show, but they wanted me to gradually disappear and go away. And we will completely forget about Mr. Jackson and the Windmill Ministries as if it never occurred. Let's put him on this no win-win cycle to where now it's a time delay game. And in the meantime, while he's getting older and his body's wearing out and deteriorating, eventually he'll shut up and he won't no longer tell people about his story. Well, I'm not shutting up, number one. Number two, the problems here in America are not going away. They're only getting worse. And number three, if the American people, not the manipulators, not the fraudulent people, but the good American people, if we don't bond together and stick together, as in united we stand, divided we fall, we're going to fall. I can't paint that picture any broader or any clearer than what it already is. We're going to fall if we don't unite. And we're going to have to unite in Christ pertaining to seeing a real, tangible, Holy Ghost revival movement here in America that will evolve into all the other countries. That's the answer. It's plain and simple. That's the answer. And if you're not willing to do that, then don't come harping and belly aching to me. Don't come crying, oh, this and that, and this didn't work out, and that didn't work out. I don't want to hear it. I do not want to hear it. Especially if you're not willing to listen. Especially if you're still trying to destroy the very thing that's trying to save you, that's trying to help you. I've made reference to this before, and I'll say it again. I've never seen a society that is so dead set in wanting to destroy itself.
In prominence, these Venezuelan gangs, they're all over the country, and they're seeping their tentacles into our society. We have to get ahead of this, and we need real solutions. That real solution is holding these people accountable, deporting people that aren't here, and double down on legal work visas, people doing it the right way.
Right, so there are bipartisan proposals.
Right, and that's part of that plan that I'm talking about, part of that point plan, that if you allow for these employers to get on board, that will be rewarded maybe through their tax exemption or something. I mean, I'm not the guy that makes all these rules. I'm not the guy that makes all the laws. I'm not the guy that's in charge of all this stuff. Only thing I can do is make a proposal, but you're going to have to make it look attractive enough that regardless whether it be the hospitality industry or whatever industry is willing to climb on board with the government and say, okay, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. And in the meantime, it's going to be worth their time in doing that.
To deal with these very complicated problems you're describing, one of them was struck in the Senate, but former President Trump scuttled that deal, as you know. Do you wish that he would have allowed that to go forward?
There were some positive things out of that the border package that the Senate was working on, but there were some very negative things. I wouldn't have voted for that. The reason I wouldn't vote for it, because it allowed 5,000 people to break the law before you enact it. The number should always be zero. We can both be firm on illegal immigration, and there was no talk of legal immigration. What about rewarding those that are doing it the right way? What about our allies in Afghanistan that we left behind? There's some things that could have been done. That was a failed bill. There's thousands of these bills. That was a failed bill before it even gets going. I'm looking for serious partners.
There's a bipartisan bill in the House. Do you support that?
Which bill? I mean, the bill that I look at it through the lens is...
I'm talking about Congresswoman Escobar's bill.
Oh, that has no chance of going anywhere. You know why? Because it's 500 pages long. So that gives you any one person to say, I don't like this bill. The other piece of it too is it talks about allowing people that are here illegally pathway to citizenship. That is dead on arrival. You don't even want to go there. You have to start with securing the border and work visas. People that are vetted here to come. You want to talk about pathway to citizenship? That's code for you really do not want to solve the problem.
Okay.
See what I'm saying? Work visas. You introduce work visas into these people's lives, and in exchange, if they cooperate and if they do everything according, at the end of the span of this contract, they have earned their citizenship. You don't just give it to them. You let them earn it. Regardless whether they be Mexican illegals or Venezuelan illegals or wherever, you allow for them to earn it. You don't just give it to them. There has to be a better way other than Donald Trump loading up everybody and costing billions of dollars and basically disrupting economies, regardless whether it be the Texas economy or whoever, rather than disrupt economies. There has to be a better way of going about doing this. And this individual that's talking about these work visas, he's on the money. He's on the money. You turn that work visa into a citizen visa once you have gone through all the hula hoops and cartwheels. That's basically a reward system, a point system.
Say you want to solve the problem, and yet you don't like any of the bipartisan proposals out there. Are you writing your own?
I do, yeah. I have a bill. It's actually 3 pages long, and what it does is it extends work visas from 1 year to 3 years, and it allows people to streamline the process. Instead of mailing in work visas, you do it online like everyone else. And there's also a border security piece to it too. So you can do both. We can both be warm and welcoming, and we can both secure the border. All the proposals right now have no chance of it. And here's another thing. Has Tim Walz ever been to the border? When was the last time he's been to the border? So you have to see it to hear these stories about the 100 migrants that are died in New Mexico. You have to see it firsthand.
And I'm going to say, he's talking about 100 people dying. That's probably a very, very low number, a conservative number. Because if the truth be known, especially in the hot summertime, whenever people are put in unprotected facilities and they can't breathe, and people die, or people get raped, murdered, or whatever, if the truth be known, those are very, very low numbers in actuality of what's actually going on towards what we're seeing that has now exploded into a invasion. And I was saying this even whenever Trump was president, long about the time whenever this started coming all into play, whenever COVID had hit, that we was being invaded. And even some of top-notch officials from the Pentagon said, oh, it's not an actual invasion. Well, in their eyes, an actual invasion is somebody coming over the border with a tank or a machine gun towards basically forcing their way to diminish or destroy our way of life. They don't realize that there's different types of invasions. And you know, the secret invasion a lot of times is worse than an all out and out assault invasion, going back to, I think it was Brezhnev, or maybe the president before Brezhnev, before Gorbachev, that said we will take the American people over and never fire a shot. How are they going to do this? How are they going to do this if they're going to take the American people over and never fire a shot? They're going to come from within. That's how they're going to do it. And that's how they are doing it. And if we're not smart enough to identify that, and then shame on us. Because our ancestors bled and died for the very rights that we have today as being true sovereign Americans. And if we're not smart enough to maintain that and to hold that, then maybe we don't deserve to have a great nation like we do called America. I mean, I'm just putting it out there on the table the way that it needs to be put out there. I mean, there has to be a practical reason in how to have a solution to all these problems other than just rounding everybody up and sending them across the border. And in a way, from a humanitarian standpoint, in a way that's actually just as cruel as it would be by doing other things, because you're taking them back into an atmosphere that you know good and well they're going to be raped, murdered, and taken advantage of. So is that the proper solution that Donald Trump talks about toward rounding everybody up, costing billions of dollars? Like I said, somebody's got to pay for all this. Is that the right solution? Or what is the better solution? I think the better solution is the work visas that's promoted in the sense of actually being a citizen visa that, as long as you go through the right hula hoops and cartwheels, after it's all said and done with, regardless whether it be a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, or even an 8-year plan, whatever, that once you've done this, then now you're considered to be a true blue American citizen. But you have to prove it. We're not going to just give it to you. You have to prove that you're worthy of this. And this, my friends, should have already come about, and this program that I'm talking about should have already been implemented years and years ago. That way these people, whenever they cross the American border, they would have had some sort of an idea what to expect, rather than the American people just going to lay out the red carpet for them and just give them whatever they want and let them live in luxurious hotels and give them a Obama phone and let them have all the same rights that we have as American citizens. Matter of fact, to some degree, I've heard some people say that illegals actually had more rights than our own Native American citizens here in America. That's sad. That is so sad whenever people actually believe that or say that, and who knows, it may actually be true.
Served in the Navy for 20 years. As a veteran, I want to get your take on what happened this week at Arlington National Cemetery. The Secretary of the Army felt that she had to put out a statement saying that an ANC employee, an Arlington National Cemetery employee who attempted to ensure adherence to the rules, was abruptly pushed aside when the Trump campaign tried to bring a campaign photographer onto the grounds with the former president. And then a top Trump advisor posted even after that, "I'm reposting this to hope to trigger the hacks at the Secretary of Army's office." Have you ever seen a campaign talk this way about?
This was August the 26th. Today's September the 1st. So we're talking about an event that was just recent.
And the fact that he was there to highlight that the 13 Americans that were killed at Abbey Gate, I think that's something that's overlooked. Once again, I served in Afghanistan. Unlike Tim Waltz, who did not serve in Afghanistan, I've been there. I retired as an E9. Unlike Tim Waltz, who retired as an E8, it's important for us to show up at the same.
I'm just curious. When you compare your service to Tim Waltz, are you saying that he's somehow less of a veteran?
I'm saying he lied about what pay grade he retired at, and I'm saying I'm not lying about the pay grade I retired at. I'm also saying it's important that Arlington is a very special place.
It is.
We have to make sure it's a special place, and we have to keep politics out of it. And I think it's important that we do that. And so, I wish both President Trump and President Biden were there highlighting the fact of these Gold Star families. This is what we need to get back to. It's so much finger pointing. I get it. It's towards the tail end of the election, but we have to get back to putting veterans first, putting our families first, and putting the American people above everything else.
Yes.
Congressman Tony Gonzalez of Texas, thank you so much for being here with us this morning. I appreciate it. And we'll be back in a moment. Stick with us. Election Day is still more than 2 months away, but voters in dozens of states won't have to wait for November to cast a ballot. 36 states plus the District of Columbia allow voters to cast early ballots by mail without providing an excuse. And in 47 states plus DC, voters have the option to vote early either by mail or in person. Joining us with a look at our election system is David Becker. He's a former civil rights attorney at the Department of Justice who now leads the Center of Election Innovation and Research. He's also a contributor here at CBS. David, it is so good to see you. It is Labor Day weekend, so it's the traditional kickoff of the election season. Amazing to think that voters in North Carolina are going to start getting their mail-in ballots as soon as this week. Give us a lay of the land. Is it going to be easier or harder for voters to cast their ballots in 2024 than it was in 2020?
Well, there's a lot of political rhetoric out there about overemphasizing fraud or overemphasizing voter suppression, and there have been some bad laws passed in some states. For instance, those voters in North Carolina will now have to provide some additional identification when they vote by mail. But overall, if we look at the history of the United States, it is easier to vote than ever before in American history. And 99.9% of voters, when they go to try to vote, they're going to find it's an easy, convenient experience. If they choose to vote in person, they're going to be around their neighbors and members of their community. They're going to wait in line less than 30 minutes. That's the normal voting experience in the United States. It is easier to register to vote than ever before. More voters have access to online voter registration now, 40%, 40 states or more. More voters are automatically registered at the Motor Vehicles Agency, things like that. And then you can check your registration easier than ever before online, right there on the state's website in almost every state. And same with voting. As you showed, early voting is available in almost every single state. Mail voting without an excuse is available in the vast majority of states. So voters are going to have a choice and be able to vote very conveniently.
What should people know about registering to vote if they haven't gotten around to it yet?
So there's still plenty of time. That's the good news. Every single state allows registration to vote for November up to 30 days before the election. So you'll have until early October to register. If you haven't registered yet, do it today. It's a great time. Go online. Go to vote.gov. That's a great site to find information about you from your state. What you'll do is there's a drawdown menu there, and you put in your state, and you'll find out information, and it'll take you to the official state source, which is the place you should always go to check your registration or register to vote. Some states allow registration through October and even on election day itself, but every single state, every single eligible voter in the United States can vote, can register to vote up until early October.
David, you've been really proactive, I see you online, pushing back when you encounter really serious election misinformation, particularly when it comes from someone like Elon Musk, who owns a social media platform and has been pushing some really inflammatory claims when it comes to voting.
Yeah, there are very powerful forces that want us as Americans who live in our democratic society to doubt that democratic society, to doubt our elections that decide our leaders, and to hate our neighbors, to think of our neighbors as enemies if they happen to disagree with us politically. And the fact is that our elections are as secure as they've ever been. We have more paper ballots now than ever before. Those paper ballots are auditable and recountable, and we do audit them to make sure that the machines counted them accurately. We have more accurate voter lists than ever before, thanks to better technology and data that allows states to share data between states and within a state to make sure that we keep up with people as they move so that we have the right address for them. We have more pre-election litigation than ever before. Some people think that's a bad thing. I happen to think it's a good thing. It clarifies those rules. When we get to election day, both sides, all the candidates know those rules. Those are the rules we're playing under. You might not like them, but those are the rules, and you can't complain about them once election day comes. And then we have had more post-election litigation that has confirmed and verified the results than ever before. We sit here 46 months after the last presidential election right now, an election that has withstood more scrutiny than any election in world history. More scrutiny than any election in world history, and there is still not a single shred of evidence that's been presented to any court. It's been presented on social media. It's easy to put anything up on social media. But to present it to a court, subject it to scrutiny and cross-examination, have a judge hear it and rule, there's not been a single shred of evidence presented in any court in the country.
But are we seeing even more misinformation this election season than we've seen in the past, and where's it coming from?
Yeah, we're seeing more election disinformation for sure. It's coming from Donald Trump. It's coming from Elon Musk. It's coming from, we know, foreign adversaries like Russia and Iran and North Korea and China, who are heavily invested in not only perhaps electing a particular candidate, but in also all of them are heavily invested in getting us to doubt that the accurate candidate was elected, to doubt that our democracy and our elections are working. And so when you see information on social media in particular that triggers something within you, that seems to make you angry about the other side, all of us as sophisticated media consumers should pause and say, what is, maybe that anger is the product they're trying to create. Maybe they're getting paid, or they're benefiting from creating that anger in us. And instead go to the trusted sources, our election officials, Republicans, Democrats, all across the country. There are hundreds of thousands of them. Our election is going to be run by them, these professionals, and we're going to rely upon about 1 million volunteers, people in our communities and our neighborhoods who are going to volunteer their time for a long day on election day to make sure that our elections are accurate. And if anyone has any doubts about the system, volunteer to join them. Volunteer to be a poll worker, go into your local county or local election site. It's usually very easy to volunteer. They're looking for people, and you'll see firsthand all of the checks and balances and redundancies that prevent widespread fraud.
Great advice. David Becker, election law expert for CBS News. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. And we'll be right back.
We're going to end this link here today, this video, regarding Labor Day weekend. We hope that you have gotten something out of all this regarding the things that's been discussed today, regardless whether it's been from A to Z, from Hanes underwear to voting issues, laws, etc., or coming up with better solutions pertaining to the problems that the American people and the world in general are having to face off on. We want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your prayers. Thank you for your patience. And most importantly, we want to say, may heaven help us all. Good luck to us all. God bless America. God bless our troops. And may God bless our endeavors towards where we go from this moment on. We can't emphasize enough by saying shalom. And thank you for listening and watching. Happy Labor Day.